let's have a little bit of a review and talk about the 4 things that the brain is scanning for in its environment to determine whether or not there is a safety issue or there is a potential challenge that is going to need to be addressed or worked with. I also then want to take these 4 threats or challenges and I want to tie them into attunement of the body and help us understand a little bit more about why it's so important to pay attention to these 4 threats and how we can make sense of them in the therapeutic process for ourselves and also for our clients. So ultimately, what the brain is scanning for is safety, ultimately. But we really need to understand what does that mean? What are the details of that? So the first one is pretty straightforward. It really has to do with physical safety. So we are constantly scanning in our environment, looking for anything, any sign of anything that might cause us any kind of physical harm, because ultimately the highest priority of the body is to stay alive. And so that's important. We got to look for safety issues in our environment that are potentially harmful to our physical well-being. The second one is the unknown. And part of what I am clarifying in these teachings is that it's not the unknown itself. And it's really important that that's understood. It's not the unknown itself that's scary, it's our perceptions in the unknown. So what that means is that when we encounter new information, we encounter a new situation, we've encountered the unknown, we don't know what's going to happen next. What we do is we make some assumptions. We look in our history. This isn't, by the way, usually a conscious process. We look in our history for associated patterns, associated experiences to try to make sense of what we have just encountered in the unknown. And our brain does this really interesting thing where it defaults, in a sense, to become a little bit hyper focused on things in our past that maybe didn't go so well, that in our current situation we're getting little reminders of. It's almost like it hyper focuses there. And the reason why is because, once again, going back to that first one, we're trying to keep ourselves safe, we're trying to keep ourselves alive. And so we err on the side of caution that, there might be a safety issue here, and therefore it might be important to be able to react or to respond in a way to be able to keep us safe. So it's really the perceptions and the unknown, and I really want everyone to understand that. It's not the unknown itself that's scary, it's what we do with it in our mind that makes it scary. A lot of assumptions. The third one, which we talk about so much in synergetic play therapy, has to do with incongruence in the environment. So really looking at how patterns are important, how our brain is scanning for things to make sense, how we look for things to add up, and when they don't, we're back in the unknown, which potentially puts us back into a safety issue. Hope you can see how these all build on each other. And so part of what we talk a lot about in synergetic play therapy is emotional incongruence, and how congruent are we, how emotionally incongruent are we, and really taking a deeper look at, does that create a sense of safety or not for our clients and for the people that we interact with. Really looking at the development within the SPT therapist on how to develop higher degrees of authenticity and congruence, recognizing that this actually plays a huge part in helping create a neuroception of safety for the child. And then the last one has to do with the shoulds and the shouldn'ts and the expectations we put on ourselves and others in the world, the unmet ones, and really recognizing that when we expect ourselves to be different than who we are, or we expect others to be different than who they are, that actually also creates dysregulation in our own internal systems, and we actually activate a fight or flight or a mobilization response to deal with the incongruence in our own environment, and the incongruence being the incongruence between our own authenticity and our fantasy self of who we think that we should be, or the authenticity of someone else and who we think they should be. So when you really take a look at these four threats or challenges, they really do build on each other, and they're very interconnected, and they're very related to each other, and very important to understand together, but also individually. So the last little piece here is what does this have to do with attunement? Well, a lot, because if I don't take the time to understand these, and then I subsequently don't take the time to understand that what it looks like in my client when one of these threats gets activated. So, what does their fight or flight response look like? What does it look like in someone? What's the range of possibility of activation visually, verbally? Like, what could that look like? If I don't understand the immobilization response, and therefore I don't understand that my client is withdrawing because I just said something that was overwhelming or whatever it may be, and if I don't understand that within myself, the bottom line is I can't attune. I can't really be able to work with my own activation and my client's activation in a way where I support myself and my client in staying within our windows of tolerance, because I'm misattuned. I'm not reading the cues. I'm not understanding that they're activated by one of the four threats potentially. I'm not understanding that I'm activated by one of the four threats. I'm then not understanding the corresponding physiology, and therefore I don't know how to intervene. I may miss the cues, and I may just keep going and flood my client, emotionally flood myself, and then again we're just out of attunement. So I would really love for you to spend some time really thinking about this. How do you in your own way conceptualize these four threats? How well do you understand the activation of the autonomic nervous system? Are you able to identify it first in yourself? That's always the place where we start. Can we identify it in ourselves first? And then if I can begin to identify it within myself, how do I identify it in others? How can I begin to more subtly attune and register and look at when their activation is happening, what it means? Are they moving towards the end of their window of tolerance? What do we need to do to bring them back into their window of tolerance? Truly, it's the art of co-regulation, and these pieces we just talked about are some of the building blocks to be able to do that successfully. So hopefully that gives you something to think about, a little bit more of a conversation you can have with yourself, and some inspiration for some deeper inquiry into what's going on within yourself and your clients during sessions.